yeah, but we're not quite ready to get going just yet.
Sorry. We're ready, sir.
Okay. So,
Supper's almost ready, isn't it?
Right.
So we'll go ahead and call this special called meeting of the Historic Preservation Review Board to order. And we'll need to begin with a roll call.
Mr. Owens,
Here.
Mrs. Hartshorn is absent. Mr. Weaver,
Here.
Mrs. White,
Here.
and Mr. Geezer.
Here.
We have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so we're here with regard to a certificate of appropriateness with regard to the Summers Building. And by way of review, we're here tonight following the issuance of a stop work order by the town with regard to the work that was progressing at the Summers Building. And subsequent to that, there's been a filing for a certificate of appropriateness with regard to the changed nature of the work. As you may recall, at our September 2nd, 2020 meeting, the board issued a certificate of appropriateness for certain work to occur at the building. Both our guidelines and the Department of Interior guidelines specify that rooftop additions in the historic district should above all be inconspicuous. At the September 2nd board meeting, the builders and the planners submitted renderings that depicted the extent to which the rooftop additions would be visible from the public right-of-way. As you may recall, these depictions indicated that the new additions would not be visible from the street except for a fairly small portion of the elevator shaft located to the north of the building, to the north and the west. But as work progressed, it's become apparent that the actual construction that's occurring has been modified dramatically. Just to briefly summarize, the stairwell on the eastern side of the building that was approved to be located in the center of the building has been moved up to the edge of the building, closer to the Main Street side, very adjacent to the Main Street side of the portion of the building. The elevator shaft has been moved closer to the Court Street facade of the building, and an entirely new structure on the plans referred to as a conference room has been added and began construction. And I asked Jason, I think, maybe they're up there now. So on the screen you can see, do you have the depictions of the before and after that we circulated earlier? So on the screen you'll see the plans that the designers and builders submitted at our September 2nd meeting are shown on the left as approved, and that depicts what was represented to us to be what would be visible from the public right-of-way. The as-built on the right depicts the construction as of yesterday. So here we're looking at the intersection of Court Street and Main Street from across the street, and you can see that the only thing that was presented as visible September 2nd was the slight protrusion of the elevator shaft in the northwest corner of the building. The stairwell was shown would not be visible from that point of view, and of course the middle structure that you see being built at the conference room was not part of the plan as submitted. And if you could go on to the next slide. This is the view from the corner of Court and Main, right there at the corner where the courthouse is, where the crosswalk is. And again, you can see that the elevator shaft is much more prominent as built and has been moved closer to Court Street. And then there's construction occurring of this conference room. There's a steel beam there, so there's to be some more construction, but you can see what's there as of yesterday. And then I think there's one more slide. And then this is a view from directly across Main Street, really in front of, between Penn Stewart and, the buildings there. And you can see that the plan that was approved and as submitted on September 2nd, nothing would be visible from that point of view. And as constructed so far, the stairwell has been moved right up to the Main Street facade, and the conference room that was not part of the original plan is shown there from the public right-of-way. So that sort of summarizes where we are. I guess before addressing, and I understand that, I mean, just the representatives from the builders are here today, we don't have the planner or anyone else here. So, at the September 2nd meeting, you know, we were all very enthusiastic about the project, and still are. I mean, it's a great project, and I think I can speak for everyone that we'd love to see it progress and occur. But it's very bewildering that, you know, we've had an October meeting, a November meeting, a December meeting, a January meeting, a February meeting. We've had almost a half a year's worth of meetings, and no one came back to tell us that these plans that we approved in September had been dramatically changed. You know, we can meet within a few days' notice, just as this meeting indicates, but these were never brought back to us, and instead what has happened is that your team has just progressed with this substantial work without ever coming back and saying, we've dramatically changed things. So, you know, we haven't had the opportunity to work with you to do that. And then it's equally frustrating that the only way that occurred was that there had to be a stop work order issued on, I believe it was March the 10th. And substantial work has occurred after the stop work order was issued. The conference room had there was just some framing up, but that was completed or substantially worked on over the next 2 weeks. The elevator shaft that has been moved forward significantly from what we approved September 2nd was wholly constructed the end of last week. So, you know, we're 2 weeks out now from when the stop work order was issued, but substantial work occurred. So, you know, before we get into your proposal, could we have an explanation of, you know, why this was not brought back to us, why we weren't consulted, why we weren't told of the changes, why so much occurred, why there had to be a stop work order issued, why the stop work order has not been followed, you know, what has happened here?
Yes, absolutely. To kind of put it in somewhat of a condensed form, and first I'd like to thank you all for making special time to come out and meet with us. Oh yeah, sorry, David Berg. So what occurred kind of from that beginning of March till now was we made the dramatic step because of an opportunity in the weather to go ahead and come up through the roof with the main stair and elevator openings. And so we of course had to substantially cut the structure of the existing building and go through the roof deck. That's when we realized, and we had to kind of very quickly reconfigure our plans, because we realized basically the point that the load points that we were initially going to hit for the rooftop construction they were going to hit over thin air, and the way originally it was planned to handle that was with large steel beams bearing on the outside walls. So when we went up through the roof, because it was good weather, we went ahead and started digging into kind of getting our load points so we could quickly get our structure built and get it kind of secured again. We realized the brick was in pretty bad condition and really beyond the point of safely being able to put that much load on those points. So,
But can I just interrupt
yeah.
for a second? But you had already changed from having that very small, non-visible area that you were calling the penthouse to this conference room, and you had plans to do that. You had to have those plans in place before you went up there to take advantage of the weather. Why didn't you come back to us and get a certificate of appropriateness and apprise us that your plans had changed before you launched into this construction?
So the plans to expand that were driven by the structural situation and concern. So basically the way that wall was determined, that point on the, as far as the width, if you're standing on Court Street looking, the width is either about 14 feet from the wall, which is about approximately where the original plan was. Because of the condition of the brick, that that forced us to have to raise the floor level of the whole rooftop structure. So then, of course, that added extra stair risers that had to be made up. And then that pushed us basically going through our beam and out past the sort of the east to west line load point that would have carried the roof of the original plan. So it was basically a last minute scramble to readjust, and even though the roof deck was, that didn't change, but where the roof of the rooftop structure, where those bearing points had to change. And so we shifted them out towards Main Street in order to make room for the stair to come up all the way. And we realized we were getting the cart ahead of the horse. And so we were, at that point, like I said, our main focus was just to try to quickly get the building secured again, and then come before you guys with, and seeking guidance as well, and with what would be the changes. But I absolutely can appreciate y'all's concern, because we are working on a regional treasure, and not just the building, but the surrounding buildings and the surrounding scenery, and we take that very seriously. This is, preserving the history in our region and the town is very important to us, and part of that is the scenery, whether it be of the buildings or the mountains. And we've really devoted ourselves to becoming students of historic restoration. We've done the Robert Preston House in Bristol, a lot of buildings in Emory, and at times we've even slashed our costs in order to steer a client away from demolishing or going with just new materials, and rather than preserving the historic nature. So I do want y'all to know that we do take this very seriously, and we do appreciate the work that y'all do in preserving the historic buildings in Abington. So I guess we definitely at this point, this is sort of like you said, we kind of got the cart before the horse, and we sort of
Well, it's significantly more than just getting the cart before the horse. I mean, you said a lot of nice things, but the fact of the matter remains that we have been working on this building and stressing to everyone how important it is for a very long time now, and have been tried to be very vigilant about how important it is that these additions be done correctly. And you all have just completely changed almost everything about the September 2 plan that we approved.
Right.
And really still have not given us any sort of explanation about why someone didn't say, we've had to change our plan, can we get a meeting tomorrow or the next day? Yeah. And as a matter of fact, the town had to issue a stop work
Right.
order to get you to then come before us.
Right.
So it's not just a cart before the horse, or
Right.
a misunderstanding,
Right.
or, it's not that
Well,
kind of thing.
and Derek, I'll just take responsibility for that, and honestly, it's just ignorance on my part, not maybe fully understanding y'all's accessibility.
Well, again, I think you're in an awkward position because you're the builder, you're not the.
Right, yeah, I do, like I said, I do take responsibility for that, because I'm kind of the one having to make, when unforeseens show up and pop up, and it is my fault for I feel like probably getting so focused on what seemed like somewhat of a catastrophic situation structurally and building wise, that I definitely should have reached out to you guys and said, hey, we have sort of an emergency situation, and I do apologize for that.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments before we move on to?
I have one comment. Our guidelines are pretty precise about this.
Yeah.
I mean, 27B says that penthouses should not be constructed, and if constructed, should be substantially out of the public view.
Right.
So that you just can't get much clearer than that.
Right.
That's the issue here, is that everything, it seems to me that everything was approved because it was going to be substantially out of sight. And
Right.
now it's just so in sight.
Right, yeah. And we, never had the intention of whatsoever of proceeding beyond just securing the building, without first coming before you guys. And like I said, that is my fault for making the assumption that we had to, wait for that, regular meeting, and I do regret that.
Well, the drawings were not prepared overnight.
Well, they were somewhat prepared, after the fact and on the fly. And so as we, realized the situation and we were adjusting, actually these drawings really were prepared, almost overnight and after the fact as well. Like I said, we definitely, in many ways, got the cart in front of the horse.
I recall at our September meeting that when the only thing that was supposed to be on the roof was a deck.
Right.
And there was considerable discussion about whether even the guard railing could be seen
Right.
from street. And we discussed briefly that the mechanical systems would have to be set back in order to comply with code, so they
Right.
wouldn't have to have the guardrail.
Right.
And it's just, seems as if all those discussions were ignored.
Yeah, and I think you understand that, we have federal and state and town guidelines
Right.
that us as a board have to follow.
Yes.
And so we're held accountable
Right.
for that. The citizens of Abingdon, I've had hundreds of phone calls, and it's unfortunate that we're in this situation.
Sure.
But we have to treat everybody equally.
Right.
Whether it's a project that's $1,000 or
Right.
$10 million,
Right.
we have to be consistent if we can.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, unfortunately, we're in this situation now, and hopefully we can work through this.
Yeah. Well, and believe me, I know you guys have a very challenging job. And if you do one thing for one person or allow something, then you
it becomes
right,
going down the rabbit hole.
right. And the historic beauty of the town could be lost in one generation, and we definitely want to protect and keep that from happening. Like I said, we really do fully support Bill's work, and I do apologize for putting you guys in the position of basically not including you guys immediately as soon as we realized what the condition of what we were assuming was a solid load-bearing exterior wall. So,
Does anyone else have any questions or comments before we move on to have a presentation of the request for the certificate of appropriateness? All right, if you'd like to just lead us through what the proposed
Sure.
changes are and what you're requesting.
I'm gonna have
Yeah,
Nathan.
I will actually
do
speak
that.
to some of that. One thing I do want to point out with this rendering, especially as sorry, I'm Nathan Berg. I'm one of the members of Wahlberg LLC. So as you look at these renderings, especially as they're compared to the photographs that were presented earlier, kind of the compare and contrast of the photographs, one thing I do want to point out is the parapet wall in the revised edition here will be raised. And the reason for raising that, as David touched on earlier, is that it's basically for structural reasons. Without getting into the weeds too much, basically we had to place the structure of the rooftop deck partially on, it had to be raised basically where it would be above the top of the current parapet wall. And so our hope is to raise the parapet wall in order to basically cover the ends of the exposed structure. And we would use a precast material that would be very similar to the precast elements in the existing building. By raising the parapet wall, it substantially reduces how visible the rooftop structure is from the street view. And that's why, as you look at the revised renderings, it looks quite a bit different than what you would see in the photographs that were taken earlier today or yesterday. And that's, a lot of that is because the parapet wall will be raised about 18 inches. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but from the street view, that does work to make the rooftop structure a lot less visible. As you can see, the back emergency egress stairwell is still definitely visible from the street. And as we performed our demolition and uncovered a lot of the existing conditions, it became apparent to us that that the interior structural walls would not be sufficient to fully support that stairwell. So we had to bring it out so that those exterior masonry walls would be able to partially support it. So that now that stairwell is supported by the exterior walls on two sides rather, instead of two sides or three sides as was originally designed. This is somewhat of a design build project, and so what that means is going into this project, we had a plan, and that plan was based on certain assumptions about the existing structure. As we uncovered the existing conditions, it became apparent that there had to be some changes, and again, that did put the design process in kind of a bind, and that's, I think, part of the reason why we're in this position today. Again, I think there's definitely a lot of things that we definitely should have done differently, and in hindsight and retrospect, we really should have done better to keep everybody in the loop.
I got a quick question. I don't mean to
Yes,
interrupt you, but
absolutely.
if I don't ask it now, I'll forget about it. That stairwell,
Yes.
I noticed that there's also a stairwell coming up through the conference room.
Right.
Are both of those necessary?
Yes.
Because
per-
of code?
Per
And
code.
honestly, if I had my druthers, we would just eliminate the one
Yes.
completely. Unfortunately, you have to have 2 points of egress, and
Right.
the elevator doesn't count as one.
Okay.
Right, so we had to have that emergency rated stairwell. Again, I wish we didn't have to, but we're bound to do that by building code.
What's gonna be the occupancy up there?
50.
And
Um,
So
that's
you
based
need
on-
2 stairwells with 50?
Well, yes, so if it was under 15, but it's based on area, and so if we had offices up there, you get 1 person per 100 square feet. If it's any kind of, where you can have a group gathering, like this would be considered more of an assembly type, and so it gives you a lot more people per square foot. It's a formula that unfortunately is
It's hard, it's
somewhat
very rigid.
Yeah.
And that's per the building code. Again, if Rick Statzer was here, he could, he could give us all the ins and outs of that, but we were kind of bound to that. And the reason for kind of pushing it forward, again, was because of the existing structural elements that were uncovered upon demolition. And I agree with you. I think that it would definitely look better if it was pushed back further. But again, for other reasons, other structural reasons, we had to move it towards that Main Street side. Again, kind of touching on part of the reason why the elevator is more visible now, the elevator shaft, is because before, when this original drawing was done, we did not have the true travel distance of that elevator. And the elevator company kind of went back and forth with them, and we did not have all the information that
And also there's a steel beam on the second floor, there's a main structural beam, and where until we took the plaster off the first floor ceiling, we didn't
Right.
posts in that
So
section.
it had to move, it had
So
to move
the
towards the Court Street side.
the original plan had it going through, partially through that beam, and so that's part of the reason why that got pulled up closer to Court Street.
One other thing I did want to mention about comparing the photograph, comparing contrast to the renderings, is that the eave and overhang of the rooftop structure will be substantially less than what you would see right now driving by there. And so that will be reduced and will make it much less visible from the street than what you currently see if you were to walk by there today. Again, the combination of the parapet wall being raised and the eaves being reduced to the bare minimum will reduce the impact of the rooftop structure so that it does fall in line more with, again, what you see here in the renderings and the mathematical models you see here compared to what you would see just driving by today.
When you say the eaves are going to be reduced, what are you saying?
So if you go to the
Right, so,
the plan view, I'll show you, the plan view of the rooftop, yes. So kind of zooming in here, so the eave overhang of this, if you look at the bottom revised rooftop plan, the eave overhang, the eave that extends beyond the glass wall of the rooftop structure. Okay, right now, it's going out further than it
Right,
will be once the,
what you see now from the ground is larger, and the reason for that was because obviously that drip line needed to, just to hold us over temporarily, needed to be extended out, so that can be reduced.
right. That, long
Are you
story
talking
short,
about the top of the conference area?
yeah, top of the conference area right now is larger than it will be once it's finished. The reason why we extended that out was basically to keep water from penetrating into the main structure.
Well, there's a steel beam right up there, or several steel beams right at the front of the building on the courthouse, right?
Right.
Is the conference room gonna be extended to that?
That, yes, so going back to the
So the conference room, as
renderings.
you see it now, is actually gonna get larger towards the Court Street side of the property and be more visible there.
Right, so going back to the renderings, so what you see in the top left, the conference room is basically flush with the elevator shaft, okay? And that is where or our proposed limit would be at the front of the elevator. Again, it's much more visible right now because the parapet is not extended right now.
But by raising the parapet, I have to admit that I didn't even pick up on that, I'm
Right.
embarrassed. But by raising that parapet, you changed the character of the building.
That in itself is an addition to the building that's
And-
highlighted.
And
Right,
just
and that's
looking
part
at
of
those
this.
two drawings on the right, you've changed the columns on the street level.
The columns, okay, this, yeah, I did wanna touch on this. So if you see in the original, you see those two columns coming down from, right in the middle of the glass portion, do you see the two
Mhm.
white columns right there?
Mhm.
Yep. So, originally we thought those were all that there was. There is in fact two columns, so there's actually four columns right there. And those are the original load-bearing columns, and which is part of the reason why we had to have these larger white sections, is because that's where those two original columns are.
Are they steel?
They are steel.
And they are there now?
They are there right now. You can drive by there and see.
Yeah, I wish I had those.
And I'd like to state that this design has not been carefully thought out or drawn. Obviously, we had to go ahead and get you guys something right away.
So we're open
Some of
to
these,
changing.
yeah, some of these details, we'd seek your guys' input, and, on the storefront glass, that was something that we were deliberating on, obviously with inclement weather, we weren't even worrying about that, we were gonna, come with if we opted to leave both columns, come with that to you guys, and so, like I said, this is maybe somewhat half-baked, and so don't feel like, you know, we invite y'all's input definitely, and like Nathan said, that when we discovered those two columns, we hadn't made a definitive decision on how to address that, but, since we wanted to have a proposal to come to you guys with, some on short notice, we just put that in.
Well, wasn't there, I mean, as I recall from the historic photographs, there would have been a single exterior revealed column there to match the rest of the building, the other side. So your plan doesn't, I mean, those columns are now just gone. They're framed in.
I don't know what happened to the original columns. We don't know when those were modified.
Right, but our, again, as of September 2nd, we were willing to allow this to occur because you were gonna replicate what was there originally as reflected in the building down the street and also on the court side street of this building. So that's being changed here. I mean, the drawing doesn't have exposed exterior columns, it just has a much larger white.
Right.
Yeah.
So actually, and you know, truthfully, I'm not sure what was there originally, if there actually was in fact originally, like how it is on the front.
Yeah. We have the historical photograph.
Okay, because on the side, you have a, somewhat of a concrete ledge down low, and then the wood framing steps up. So, it's hard to tell. I don't believe there would have been enough room actually to have the column set actually to the exterior of a storefront glass. Now possibly a partial reveal.
But isn't there the same amount of space as there is on the Court Street side where the
No.
columns are revealed? Or what
It's
about down on the building that has the exposed columns that is now the coffee shop?
Right, so on the Court Street side, there's the porch, and so the columns sit directly under the beam. And so if you look on the Main Street side, those columns, which are now two steel columns that match the interior columns.
This column is right in front of the window.
Yes, so that's under the porch on the Court Street side.
Right, but there's still.
And it's right under
The glass is behind where the column would be.
Right, so you see on that side, those columns are directly under the beam. If you look at the top of the columns, you see kind of a beam.
Right.
So on the Main Street side, you can see that the beam, they use steel for the beam, which probably what they use the whole way around. And just inside the beam, then you have the finished interior floor actually steps up, and that line where the floor stops is actually just to the interior side of the original, of those columns, of basically the original interior wall. So the storefront would have to have intersected with those two brick columns, the brick column and
There's the photograph that shows the columns on the exterior of the window.
Right, so, yeah, it looks like those are a partial reveal column. Can I keep this?
Sure.
That would be great. This is fantastic. And so we could definitely copy this. Like I said, they're a little different than on the front porch, because just that floor space room, you don't have as much. But yeah, I'd love to take this, because like I said, we were still scratching our heads, but kicking that can down the road when we realized we knocked the block and the brick out, and at first we thought, oh no, they've taken all the columns out, because we went right underneath the steel beam in the ceiling. But then we realized there were two columns on either side. So it'd be my guess, according to this picture, that they may have put those columns in order to support the building, and then removed the original columns. So we can definitely go with this.
Can I say something? I'll just make a comment. Well, I mean, here again, I'm just going back to the guidelines that are guiding us
I'm not
and
seeing that
you.
photograph.
They're very specific to storefront facades. that have been altered should be reconstructed to original condition based on pictorial or physical evidence. So, I mean, we've got the
Yes.
model to go by.
Well, and we feel that it's important, aside from, you know,
Yeah, I think we can match this.
something else that you noticed, and,
Mr. Burke?
yeah,
I apologize.
Yeah.
I wasn't here until the very last meeting, and Betsy's kind of out of the loop too. This is her first meeting with
okay.
you guys, and
Mhm.
I've not seen that photograph. Do you mind if I look at
No, I
it
have-
just
I
real
have
quickly
either.
and then give
This-
it back to
This
you?
is like gold, right?
Thank you.
Something else we discovered, and I'm not sure if it's reflected here or not, well, it is if you look for it. On the corner of Court and Main, that outside corner of the building, not the column, not the brick column, but the original storefront, the original front entrance was actually at a 45 on that corner, rather than extending all the way out to a 90. So we would like to put that back. And you can tell that that's the way it originally was, because the beaded ceiling
Mm-hmm.
comes in, and they've patched in the original flooring. You see that it stops along that 45. So that would be
We're,
something we would like to.
we're actually, we're able to locate the original front doors in the basement. And so we're seeking to restore those and actually use the original front doors as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions, or have you covered everything, or?
Well, yeah,
I got a I'm going back to the roof.
yes.
Looking at this photograph here, if you don't mind stepping over here to help clarify for me where this beam, I think, is one Byram's talking about.
Okay, so some of that is temporary structure.
So how far is the,
Hold on just a second.
Yep.
Can you put the before and after photos back up on the very first one, the one that shows the Court Street facade? I think that'll help us all with the.
yeah, I'm
Send the
having a hard time visualizing.
So
the next-
this,
the
Yeah,
next
right
one,
there.
maybe.
yeah,
That one.
Yes.
So that beam up the top, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm questioning
So-
about where,
So this would,
okay, so the top of the parapet wall. Go ahead, Nate, sorry.
so this dark line would represent the front of it would stop right about there. Ignore basically from here over, that would go away. This would represent the front of the conference room area. Okay, now, keep in mind though, that this parapet wall would also extend up, so you would only see the very top portion of that conference room area, because the parapet wall would extend up. And it would match the original roof line.
so basically it would stop right here,
Mm-hmm.
at this line,
Yeah, yeah,
all this would be gone.
right.
Okay.
And then, like you're saying, the parapet wall would
Yeah, come up.
brick, you know, we'd go up with brick a certain ways, and then a
Okay.
precast, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And, you know, we are definitely very open to any suggestions. I mean, on the fire escape was one of my, just, is something I would definitely like to figure out a better way of addressing. And so obviously my main focus though was just kind of getting the building secured. So at this point, I would definitely like to, you know, we would love the opportunity to come back with a better design. And
Well, does anyone have any further questions regarding the presentation regarding the certificate of appropriateness?
So basically, we are supposed to approve or deny the presentation that's been presented as tonight? Is that,
Yes.
Unless they want to withdraw it.
unless what?
Unless they want to withdraw it and delay until you come back with a different design.
we would just, you know, what, seek your guidance on that, you know, just what y'all would recommend.
Well, so, you know, we've sort of beat a dead horse in terms of we are bound by certain guidelines. We have our guidelines, that we have enacted. And then we also, those guidelines, in the preface incorporate the Department of Interior's guidelines.
Right.
And there are very specific guidelines with regard to additions to rooftops, which, you know, by its very nature is a very distinct breed of adding on to a historic building.
Right.
It's not an addition to the
Right.
side, it's not a new construction,
It's a very specific, yeah.
Yeah, and so what and really the overall most significant sort of general thread to all this is that it has to be inconspicuous, which, that doesn't mean it has to be invisible, it just means that it has to be
You wouldn't necessarily
inconspicuous,
notice it going
not
by.
conspicuous. And so what the guidelines provide is that, and that is really the key to the rest of the guidelines, which is, the design is compatible with the size, scale, color, material, and character of the property and the historic district. So the guidelines require that rooftop additions be inconspicuous, and that in addition to that, and I think by way of being inconspicuous, they need to be compatible with the size, scale, color, material, and characters of the property and the historic district. And then the Department of Interior guidelines provide they are to be designed so that they are inconspicuous from the public right-of-way, are set back from the primary elevation of the building, and do not damage character-defining features of the historic building. Rooftop additions are almost never appropriate for buildings that are less than 4 stories high. So this building is 3 stories high. So, you know, we're already in a
yeah.
difficult territory because
It's less
again,
than, yeah.
it's low. And the guidelines also provide that generally rooftop additions should not be more than 1 story in height and are more compatible on buildings that are adjacent to taller buildings or dense urban environments. Well, this is the tallest building in the area, and it's not in a dense urban environment. So there's a lot of things
Right.
working against it, and, you know, our approval on September 2nd was because what you all presented did all those things.
Right.
It was inconspicuous. It was, if you look at the drawings, all that you could see was a little bit of that elevator shaft
Right.
up above. And then now what we have is anything but inconspicuous.
Right.
And, you
Well,
know, I understand that the proposal is to extend the parapet wall, but that in itself is an addition to a
Right.
historic building that's gonna be highly conspicuous.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. I think, based on what you're saying, I think we would like to withdraw and come back. But before, while we're working on this, it would be useful for us to know if the parapet wall was extended following those 2 guidelines in keeping with the color and type of material, so that essentially,
Let's say if the parapet wall, instead of using any precast element, if that was
If-
entirely brick that matched the existing brick, so that the only difference would be the height of it, which is difficult, as most of you admitted, it's not something that stood out immediately to you, the height difference in the parapet.
Well, I think it makes the building, it changes the character of the building and it makes it top-heavy.
Right, so if that precast, the lighter buff color, was all brick, which matched basically the original, and if that was used instead of the buff color, which is, stands out more. And so use that as a way, as a means of reducing the visual impact of the rooftop structure. Again, because it's,
yeah,
something else too to keep in mind is that it is 3 stories, but it is also perched on top of the hill. So most of your view sheds and your approaches are from a position of being lower than that building, which does help make it less conspicuous as well, just by your line of sight.
The fire escape, that's something that we could look at.
Is that on the back of the building that we're just not seeing it? Is that on
all
That's
going.
what you're seeing right there.
He's talking about the stairwell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Stairs.
that is the fire, it's a rated, it's a 2-hour rated fire escape. And we could look at other ways of getting that structure down to try to minimize that, some
Lower.
more, yeah.
I'm not convinced you couldn't put it where it was previously. I mean, you would have to build it from grade level maybe, but, I mean, that's what,
Right.
that's what was proposed.
Well, and like you guys pointed out, the main thing is trying to, follow those guidelines as closely as possible, so,
Well, I mean, I guess the thing that we shouldn't do is obviously design your project for you.
Sure.
And we would very much like to be as helpful as we can be, but really all we can do is explain, hopefully in as much detail as we possibly can, what our guidelines
Right.
are and what we need in order to approve or disapprove.
Right.
And how you're going to do that is going to have to be up to you. I don't know that there's much more that we can offer beyond that.
sure. And I guess, some of those guidelines, leave a little bit of vagueness in their interpretation. For example, what is, like material or inconspicuous is extending the parapet wall higher with a matching brick and matching mortar. Does that fit the guideline? Because that's a big part of what, when you look at the photograph that just looks so different than the picture, is the fact that that structure had to be pushed up, which obviously made it much more visible. So, to extend the parapet wall up, definitely.
That structure is gonna be basically a fairly large, it looked to me like it was going to be just a glass enclosed cube, pretty much, or
So this is all very, because everything's somewhat just suddenly changed, but the discussions that have resulted from this change were basically, depending on what you guys were able to approve, ideally would be glass, and just in the past few days have even talked about if we're able to get approval, the owner's been talking with a high-end restaurant about coming in, because now, from the owner's standpoint, and just kind of speaking on their behalf, obviously this is all going to cost a lot more than what the original thought was. So in order to offset that cost, they've sought to lease it to a restaurant where you'd have a high-end restaurant with a rooftop seating and using the basement for a wine cellar for tastings. And so I would really like to, when we come back in front of you guys, have something that we can all get excited about again.
One struggle I have, and I'll admit I did not notice that the parapet had been raised in the plans, and so I didn't do any research. I don't know if that's, my gut feeling is it's not allowable, but I don't know that for sure, just from my own.
Right.
I don't know how the rest of them feel about that, so I
Right.
can't give you an answer. I know that's what you're seeking right now.
Right, and I know when it comes to all buildings, but particularly historic buildings, proportions are very crucial. There is, I do feel like, somewhat of a range of appropriateness to maintain the proportions that would be fitting to that specific architecture type. But
And we have to be careful about, it's inappropriate for us to design it for
Sure.
you.
Sure. Right.
So that's why we're hesitant on.
yeah, and if that's something that, if y'all are open to seeing in a design, then we don't want to come forward with something that's just definitely just an absolute no-fly zone. But if there is a range there where that could be appropriate, that is something we'd like to pursue, and definitely come back with a better thought out plan and, something that fits the guidelines closer or completely, and that give us, time to adjust to these changes that we've encountered.
Well, it sounds like, on the lower level there, on the facade, on the storefront facade, sounds like an easier
Yeah.
remedy
Yeah.
for you to be dealing with. It sounds like this is the issue, going to be the issue up
Yes.
here. In order to maintain your rooftop, you've got to have somehow or another to make it inconspicuous.
Right.
But it's probably, as what Mike said, it's going to be a hard issue, a difficult issue
Mhm.
that probably requires some really good design,
Yeah.
thoughtful
Yeah.
design from, some
yeah,
architectural.
With plenty of detail on that, for sure, yeah.
Yeah,
And obviously execution with, anytime you, add onto any old siding material, whether
Mhm.
it's brick or wood,
mhm,
execution is key
mhm,
for it looking, its age.
right.
I do have copies of these Department of Interior guidelines if you'd like them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very brief. There's really just a few pages, but
Yeah.
I think, again, the whole point is, being inconspicuous.
Yeah.
And not, altering the original fabric of the building.
Yes.
So.
One thing I would like some clarity on, and just because I know all of you have a lot of experience in this, there's kind of two philosophies, I guess, when it comes to historic additions. And one is to make it so that you can recognize it as being from a different time period.
Frankly
as-
different.
Right.
Right,
exactly.
right.
And then there's another philosophy which says it needs to be, made so that you
Right.
can't see the difference.
I
As
think,
far as, our approach with this, moving into the design process and kind of reworking the design, what is the board's official position on that?
Well, I'll be glad to address that, and then everybody can chime in if you think but I know that there's definitely that, thread running through the idea of doing new addition to a historic building. And that, obviously that's where you're adding a wing or another, or some sort of something to a building, that there is an idea that you don't want to try to, make that look like it was an original feature of the building, but as I read the Department of Interior guidelines and our guidelines, a roof addition is a
Is a little
totally
different, yeah.
separate
Okay.
issue.
right, you're not,
And the buzzword and the whole idea is to make it inconspicuous.
Right,
So that.
right, that's kind of the,
So I don't think there would be
yeah,
any room for something that's gonna stand out as a new addition.
Right.
Because that by its very nature, that's going to do just the opposite of every single.
right,
The guidelines say being conspicuous, they say use similar materials, similar spacing,
Right.
similar design features. So I don't think there is a notion that I've seen in their guidelines or our guidelines or otherwise with regard to historic preservation, that you would make rooftop additions stand out as new.
Right. right, yeah, yeah,
And
So-
you have to take into consideration that your own environment, your own historic district,
Right.
historic districts are different in
Right.
different
Right,
places.
and that's why I wanted to
yes.
And,
sort of
yes.
see where you guys.
And I think the
were.
personality of our community would be way more accepting of exactly what Byram just said.
Right, just inconspicuous.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, well, guys, like I said, thank you very much, and it is actually very helpful to me to know that you guys are available even outside, outside regular meetings.
We
and,
certainly are. We
Okay.
can meet really probably on a day or two's notice.
Just,
Okay.
just to repeat what Byram said, we're really excited about the project.
Well, and I know you guys are, and I know y'all are, y'all are not trying to be difficult at all. I know that, I realize that, and we really do appreciate
Yes.
your support and enthusiasm for the project. And I, on that, I would like to say, I hope we can get a design that meets the guidelines, so that way, potentially could enjoy, dining on the rooftop, and enjoying the,
Somebody have a glass of wine.
We'll have a glass of champagne up
yeah,
there.
the view of all the Amiens rooftops, and so it's very,
So So I guess to make sure that we're all in the same board, then you are withdrawing the request for a certificate of
Yes.
appropriateness and you will resubmit. And just so we're clear, the stop work order remains in
Yes.
place till
Right,
you.
and I do wanna, after we received that, stop work order, there was a certain amount of work that did have to continue on to basically grind the building in. It was completely open to the elements.
Yeah.
And, I do appreciate your patience
Yeah.
with us as we wrapped that up and, you know, that was, it was stressful knowing that we were trying to get it wrapped up
Yeah.
and weatherized as quickly as we could without, you know, I didn't want any of you to think that we were ignoring that
Yeah.
stop work order.
If I had y'all's phone numbers, I'd be calling you up saying, hey guys,
Yeah.
I know it looks bad, but.
Right, and Jason was great about, you know,
Yeah.
meeting with us, and we, you know, tried to
Yeah.
get that wrapped up as quickly as possible. But the building is secure now, so there, you know,
Well,
there's no need to.
There's,
Our next scheduled meeting is the first Wednesday in,
Which
April.
is, I think, the 7th.
so hopefully
Okay.
you'll be
yeah,
back.
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much.
All right,
And I know-
Appreciate it. We
I know y'all aren't
appreciate
getting paid anything, and this is a sacrifice, and we really do appreciate
A
it.
labor of love.
It is, yes.
That glass of wine in the wine cellar will be
Yes.
payment enough.
Yeah, no good deed goes unpunished, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Are there any public comments? I don't think there's any.
No, sir.
on here. All right, any further business to be addressed? If not, is there a motion that we adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded, roll call.
Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Mr. Weaver, Mrs. White,
Aye.
Mr. Geezer.
Aye.
So,
All right.
101 here, since